Welcome to the inaugural lecture series of the Coalition of Community College Architecture Programs. This year, it is associated with the 2023 Student Design Competition, also sponsored by the CCCAP. And today, we are really fortunate to have with us Michael Davis, who is a principal at Bergmeyer in Boston. There, not only is he a principal, but he is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. He has served on the AIA National Board Government Advocacy Committee that shapes AIA's public policies. And in 2013, he served as the president of the Boston Society of Architects. At Bergmeyer, which is a multidisciplinary design collaborative, Mike works at the intersection of design in the public realm, sustainability, and public policy advocacy. His expertise includes professional ethics, sustainable design, materials transparency, and liability risk. Mike has been able to capitalize on his understanding of the relationship between sustainable design and public policy in both his advocacy and his practice as a longtime leader in his firm, in his profession of architecture, and in his community. So welcome, Mike. I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Betsy. Well, that's a impressive introduction, isn't it? So yeah, I want to talk about architecture as advocacy. Architects working on behalf of communities to promote shared vision through their work. And the projects I'm going to show you are all volunteer projects. And I'm not saying we should do volunteer work. I mean, we do need to get paid. We need to do paid work, but we should also do volunteer work too, because it's the right thing. Because we as design professionals have kind of unique abilities. What it is we can imagine a future state, a beneficial future state that doesn't exist yet. We can represent it, and we can draw it. We can make images of it, and we can convince people of this desirable future state. This is a superpower that designers have, and we need to use that for the good, because sometimes people live in communities and they think there are problems that aren't. They don't see solutions to the problems. And yeah, climate change, poverty, disinvestment, systemic racism, those are tough problems, and sometimes the first step in addressing those problems is to have a shared vision for what you would like your community to be. And that's where we come in. That's where if we donate from our superpowers to communities that can't see their way out of these really knotty solutions, then we can do good. We can do better. We can do better that way. We can do good things that way. So I do this stuff through a program at the AIA called the Communities by Design. They do these things called design assistance teams. They have a process. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the process, but it's designed to be very very engaging the public, to be very participatory. They go in, a community asks them to do this service grants, and they go in, and it's a very participatory process where the people in the community get to be part of the design conversation, design thinking. You'll see some examples of that in the projects that I'm going to show you. The 4 projects I want to talk to you about that I've done over the years, I've done probably 20 of these, but I picked 4 to talk to you about: Bath, Maine; Augusta, Georgia; Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That was a good trip; and Louisville, Kentucky. And no matter what project it is of these we're doing, there's 3 things that always happen. First is that we observe. The design team spends a lot of time walking around and looking at the community, looking at the buildings, looking at the spaces. We soak in a lot of information. 2 is that we listen. We have community meetings where we hear from the people that live in the town. What is it that you hope for? What is it that you need in this project? And the last thing is that we draw. I personally do a lot of the drawing for these projects. You don't have to learn, you don't have to be able to draw to do this kind of work. But if you're a student right now in a design school, you should work on your drawing. Do yourself a favor, learn how to draw. It's a great tool. So first, Bath, Maine. Bath, I want to show you this because this was a real climate impact study. This community is dependent on its waterfront. Its whole reason for being was the shipping industry, the shipbuilding industry, and they're really nervous about climate change because a lot of their downtown is susceptible to to sea level rise and flooding and storm surge. So the first thing we had to do is to tell them about these little sketches here that I did about what could happen, what's likely going to happen with sea level rise. You're going to have the coast is going to move. You're going to have a part of the city that is no longer above water. You're going to have a part of the city that regularly floods, and you need to learn how to deal with the flooding. And then there's a part of the city that is above the flood line that you don't have to worry about. So those three zones have different impacts on the community. So then we go into the town and we do one of the things we always do is a big master map that shows our study area and what our recommendations are. And you can see the kind of pink blocks here are places where we're saying you could do new buildings. So you can do infill or renovation here. And there is still growth. I mean, even if you're dealing with climate change impacts, you still have to think about growth too. So those are our locations that we're proposing growth. And I want to show you a couple of the sketches that we did. This first one is on Commercial Street. This is on the left is what it looks like right now. And this is the part of the city that is going to be very susceptible to sea level rise. In fact, what we're saying is you have to give up this part of the city. Those buildings on the right, probably going to go, but the buildings on the left, I mean, you can see on my sketch on the right here, we're showing some infill, new buildings here in this, where was this empty lot. We're showing these existing buildings renovated, and we're showing a new kind of walkway, new kind of public realm right along the water's edge. So this, again, we're trying to say that this could be a good thing. This could still end up being a good thing for this community. Then, meanwhile, up on High Street, which is aptly named because the water's not going to go there. This is where you could really look for greater density. What we're showing is this beautiful little historic building with new housing on top of it. 3, 4, 5 floors of housing. We're always looking for places to put housing and put affordable housing, especially near a city center. So this is a good place to put housing on this little beautiful building that is not going to get flooded. And then in the middle of the city is a place called, aptly named, Water Street. This is one of those places that we know is going to be prone to flooding. So the idea is to get the water out as soon as possible, to contain the water as effectively as you can. And to do that, so we pulled back, we're doing an aerial sketch now in the middle of this parking lot. A lot of this parking lot has been turned into what we call green infrastructure, which is a swale, a bioswale, and a kind of a basin to take the water that does get into the site off of the site as quickly as possible. And then on this uphill side, we're showing some new housing on top of parking, because the parking is going to get wet too, and we don't want to suggest there are new kind of habitable, occupiable uses in the flood zone. So those are the kind of studies that we did for that community, for Bath, Maine. The next one is Augusta, Georgia. This one is interesting because when you think of Augusta, Georgia, you think of the Masters and golf tournaments. That's really the first thing that people think about when they think of Augusta, Georgia. And the most beautiful golf course in the nation, and this very prestigious tournament, golf tournament. But in fact, that circle up there is where the golf club is. And just a few miles down the road is this neighborhood called Laney Walker Bethlehem. And the photographs on the left are from Laney Walker Bethlehem neighborhood. So this neighborhood group brought us in because they're saying there's great inequity happening here. There's all this money and all this wealth and all this resource up there in the downtown associated with the tournament. Meanwhile, we're living in subhuman conditions with shotgun shacks with no electricity, no water. So we need to do something. How do we fix that? And so our approach was to look at the neighborhood and imagine it as a kind of vital, thriving, connected part of the city. What would that look like? What shape would it take? And so we started to identify major roads that connect in to the central business district and connect back to the other neighborhoods. There's an area over here, this kind of turquoise area that's actually the Georgia Health Sciences University, which is a big employer right there, right next to Laney Walker Bethlehem. And we're also looking for places within the neighborhood that we can make little destinations, little green spaces, little commons. And So that was the big kind of plan. So the next thing we did, again, was to draw sketches of what that might look like. The first one I want to show you are these kind of gateway entries up here. This is the central business district, and it's really important for people coming in and by this neighborhood to get a sense that this is an important, desirable neighborhood. So what would that look like? So this is the way that looks now. Kind of Walton Way was the name of the road, and it's, you know, it doesn't look terrible, but there's not much here in terms of kind of a civic identity. So we said, let's give this a kind of an identity. Let's make it feel like a gateway into a neighborhood. So we're showing, you know, mixed use development on both sides. We got rid of the parking lots. We're showing some kind of a graphic or a signpost or something that says you are entering Laney Walker Bethlehem and trying to celebrate the neighborhood. Just around the corner from that site is what used to be some of their industrial sites here, and it's largely abandoned. I mean, this is just a canal now that serves as a kind of a bioswale for rainwater, but nobody goes here because it's like in terrible shape. So we're thinking you could turn this into a promenade. You could make it an arts district or a shopping district or something right along the canal, and really make an asset out of it, and renovate the historic industrial buildings. And this could be a real important place in the neighborhood. And then this is a really important edge. This is the edge where on the left is the hospital, that giant employment base. On the right is the neighborhood, and what separates them is the tracks. This is literally the other side of the tracks, called the Dent Boulevard. And so we're saying this needs to be a really important edge of this neighborhood. We need to change this drastically. And this change involves a really major step that I don't know how this happens, but we said let's get rid of the train and replace it with with light rail, with buses or light rail transportation. So it becomes part of the way that people get into downtown, instead of a barricade, instead of an obstacle between the employer and the residents. So this was a big step. But part of what we're saying here is that you really need to pay attention to that edge of your neighborhood, because this is where you actually interface with the major employer. This needs to be changed. So those are the sketches that we did for Augusta, Georgia. And and this too. And there are no parks within this neighborhood. There were absolutely no usable outdoor recreational spaces. So we said, look, take one of your empty lots, turn it into a park. It'll look like this. Every neighborhood should have these kinds of spaces in them, right? So the big trip, not the last one I want to show you, but the big trip was to Rio de Janeiro. This really is a picture taken by me in Rio de Janeiro. This is quite an adventure. Now, but the thing is, that picture is down here. That picture is from Sugarloaf Mountain back here. And this is where the Zona Azul is, where all the tourists go. This is Copacabana and Ipanema. This up here was our study area. This is their historic seaport, their historic commercial district, which has been, which like a lot of the other design assistance sites we go to, it has been disinvested in. There hasn't been an investment. There was, when the Olympics were in Rio, there was a promise. There was a lot of money given to the city, and the idea was they were going to really invest it all in the downtown, the Porto Maravilha. They didn't do it. This hill here, the Morro de Providencia, is a barrio. That's the favela. That's kind of one of the largest residential neighborhoods in Rio. And this is what the residential neighborhoods look like. They're favelas. They're really, people don't own their places where they live. There are no public services, no utilities, no police. It's really kind of sad. So what we said is, instead of talking about, they wanted us, the people that brought us in here were business community. They want us to talk about the warehouse district and this really important new Valongo Wharf, which is important. They recently unearthed this. It's a site of what was the slave trade in Rio, and it's really important from a historical standpoint. But this is where all the hotels are, and this is where all the businesses are. And we said, no, let's talk about the residents. Let's talk about the favelas and about what the people that live here need first, because that's really where you start. So here is us talking to there were some students there. We have one of the people on our team was from University in Florida, and they brought a community group, and we started scribbling, and this is like the beginning of our map, and we're talking about, here are the tourists, here are where the employment is, but here are the residents. So how do we bring all those three different populations together and serve all their needs? So this was our giant master plan. We talked about these zones, these improvement zones. This one, the old warehouse district, and stuff over here, and these edges. And I want to show you a couple of these sketches. This was a lot of information all at once. But again, what's cool are the sketches. This is where it started. This is where our work started. We said this is a historic street that marked the edge. There used to be the edge of the city. That's why that wharf where the slave trade was here. And so we said, let's start by celebrating that moment where the old city is on one side, the new city is on the other side, and this kind of important landmark is in between. So our first move was to say, let's do a visitor center, on that spot, which is now just down here. You can see just a big empty lot. Let's do a visitor center on that spot where people can actually get up and they can look down at the wharf, at Valongo Wharf, and they can also get oriented where they are in the city, and they can also turn around and look back at the residential neighborhood, which is right behind you here. The favela starts on this edge right here. And so our next sketch was of that edge. And I think this may be particularly interesting to you, because what we said is there's also a hospital right here. And we said the hospital probably could use some housing right next to it. So let's look at this edge, this kind of decrepit edge with some really interesting, beautiful remnants of historic buildings in here. And let's renovate this and add some new architecture in with the old architecture, and kind of combine, the new stuff with the old stuff. At the same time, this is one of those little passageways, a little stair that gets you up into the favela, leaving that, celebrating the fact that there's a residential neighborhood up here. But let's make it look, let's improve it. Let's make it look better. Let's use new architecture to enhance and complement the historic architecture. This is something that we can imagine, that we can draw. And then in the warehouse district, there are a lot of these are all really abandoned warehouse buildings, abandoned industrial buildings. You can see this is a fabulous light rail vehicle transportation system that was put in, but nobody lives there, so nobody uses it. So we said this needs some attention. But I mean, the murals are very important. They got a lot of cultural significance to them, and we said, let's not get rid of the murals, but let's imagine one of these buildings. Say we're going to keep the mural. We're going to introduce a market, kind of a large scale farmers market, which is something that the people we talked to said they desperately need, a central place where local farmers can actually sell their produce, and then turn the rest of it into green, affordable housing. But so keep the big mural. So keep the stuff about the project, about the buildings that are important, and then introduce uses that are needed in the community instead. And then the last one is down here in this area called Santa Cristo, which is really, really bad shape. A lot of abandoned industrial buildings, a lot of empty lots, lots of room for improvement. This is like blank slate. So we said, let's take one of these sites, say here, that site here, and just imagine it as housing, as new affordable housing. We tried to make it, a little funky, so it would feel a bit like the rest of the architecture in Rio, and active ground floor uses, and kind of enhanced public realm. And this is, again, this is us saying, there's so much potential here. Let us show you what it looks like. Let us show you what the potential looks like. And then when we went up to the favela, there was a place where you could look back down at that neighborhood and see the kind of disuse and the disinvestment that happened there. And this isn't easy for us to say, look, this is where you need daycare, you need healthcare, you need public services, and there are plenty of places to put them. This was already a dance academy, as we understood. It was the dance school, the teachers teach samba and salsa. And so let's bring the muralists down here. Let's make that stuff look as funky as those warehouse buildings, and just start to show people how this neighborhood could be better, could be an asset for them. So that was Rio. And then the last one I want to tell you about is Louisville, Kentucky. And I want to tell you about this one primarily because I learned something in this project. This was like back in 2015, so it wasn't recent, but the lessons I got out of this project really stuck with me. It was a real eye-opener for me. Similar kind of assignment, where the group that brought us in was a civic association called West of 9th, because their their premise, their presentation was that 9th Street was this kind of line in the middle of Louisville, where people said, if you go to Louisville, don't go west of 9th Street, because that's where the poverty is, that's where the crime is. As long as you stay in East Louisville, then you're safe. So don't come to West Louisville. And meanwhile, they said there's a huge Black American population, Black population of African Americans living in this part of the city. But you can see the disparity. This was part of the information they sent us, before we went down there. The median income in West Louisville is $21,000, and East Louisville, it's almost 3 times that. The home value is the same kind of discrepancy. 22% vacancy rate in West Louisville, 9% in East Louisville. So, and it goes on and on and on. Many more Black people living in West Louisville, many more white people living in East Louisville. So this is obviously, an equity matter here. This is clearly, it's got equity written all over it. This is your fabulous skyline of downtown Louisville, and these are some of the pictures from West Louisville, what it looks like right now. So we said, okay, this is a big one. What can we do? How can we help address this? So I like to be able to cook these things down to kind of simple diagrams. And these are some of the drawings that we did that made it into our final presentation. And they're really basic. The context is, here's the downtown, and here's the pinky areas where all the growth is happening. And the growth is all happening out to the east. And meanwhile, out here is West Louisville, where nothing is happening. There's a dotted line goes out there called Muhammad Ali Boulevard. You might not know that Muhammad Ali was born in Louisville, and he lived out in west of 9th Street. The Muhammad Ali Museum is actually in downtown, not out west of 9th Street. So they took their icon and they put him in the downtown instead of where he actually grew up. So which is a problem. So that's the context. The impediment, 9th Street, is actually an impediment. It's actually part of the problem. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. And there's this kind of, between 9th Street and this kind of land bank of all of these institutional uses that had been assembled next to 9th Street. The opportunity is there's a Kentucky Center of African American Heritage right here. And there's a public housing project that's going to have major renovations here. And there's this location for this potential farmers market out here. And there's Muhammad Ali Boulevard that connects all these things. And if we could see that as a new arts and cultural district, the real goal here is to bring West Louisville together, to unite West Louisville around this space, this place right here, and break down this barricade and create a new gateway. But that is going to be harder than it sounds, because what 9th Street is, and this is what we learned, is something that they refer to as a barrier of extra legal segregation. This divided highway, this bermed 8-lane divided highway, and all of the parking garages and the courthouses and the federal office buildings were all created purposefully to keep the Black people out of the downtown and to make a barrier between that residential neighborhood and the downtown. It was done deliberately. There's record of it. There's record of the planning for this off-ramp that was 9th Street. There's record of people from the churches that lived out in West Louisville showing up and saying, you can't do this to us. You can't do it. But they did it anyway. So we said, this is what needs to be undone. This is institutional, urban planning that is segregating, is creating a barrier between the communities. So that was the hard part. So we said, okay, we're going to have to change this intersection. We're going to have to change this intersection, and we're going to have to acquire some of these parcels. We're going to have to take over some of those parking lots, because we're going to need to actually connect. That's how you connect to the downtown, is to get through this block, get through these impediments. So what does that look like? So first, I'm going to start way out here in the edges. Like, there's this fabulous little historic bank, the Mammoth Life Insurance building, that I want to show you what it looks like. And then there's a big dumb empty lot. It's a big kind of state-owned parcel. It's a parking lot right now. So there's what used to be this fabulous historic bank that's now clad in this kind of garbage material, and this is this giant state-owned parking lot. So that's where we're going to start the change happening right here. We're going to strip this stuff off of that building. We're going to renovate this building, and then we're going to build new over this parking lot. We're going to actually bring some kind of density and some active uses right out into onto that street and kind of start the new Muhammad Ali Boulevard, and let this kind of penetrate through this barrier, and get us into let the residential neighborhood connect the downtown. So a quick sketch of what that looks like. Here is the actual street itself from ground level. You can see it's like a 8-lane divided highway, berms in the middle, really, really long crosswalks. Like you can't run from here to there at one time. So that's going to change. Oh, and we also work with a landscape architect on these teams too. So these are some of the diagrams from the landscape architect that talk specifically about, historic lighting, gateway signage, neck downs, shorter crosswalks, paved crosswalks, gateway signage and seating. And so that was the kind of the plan illustration of that. This is my sketch of this too, is what happens is you can see this, the crosswalks are shorter, they're kind of more important, the traffic calming devices. There's some density. We're showing some residential buildings, some density comes right up to the street, making these really kind of positive, complete street edges in here. And we're also starting to introduce a graphic of some kind. We're saying, this needs a kind of an identity, a kind of a heritage signage, heritage graphics. And so we're just making this stuff up. But this is what we're saying is you need to call this out as an important neighborhood. And then a little farther down Muhammad Ali Boulevard, this is a beautiful historic church, and a lot of empty sites around it. So we said more great opportunity here. This is how this looks like. Again, this is the new architecture and the old architecture really kind of working together. And we're illustrating what we call a complete street here. So we've got sidewalk uses associated with the retail, and we've got walking surface, and we've got the kind of a green, it's a green area in between those two. There's parallel parking, which really is a good traffic calming device. We've got a bike lane over here, and we've kind of narrowed the travel lanes down into kind of 2 lanes and 1 for turning. This is what we refer to as a complete street, and this is kind of a really good, tried and tested and true approach to creating a public realm, kind of a beneficial public realm. And then this is farther out Muhammad Ali Boulevard. This is that Kentucky African American Heritage Center. It's a nice project, but there's nothing else there. There's a kind of fence around it and a bunch of lawn, and nobody knows it's here. You can't identify it as such currently. And so again, our approach here's the landscaper's approach, and part of her thinking is that this doesn't need to be it doesn't all need to be high level of investment. It could just be some open plaza seating, some tents for temporary use, and some nice landscaping, and a little water feature, and some seating. And that's probably, and take the fence down, by the way. that would be enough. And so here's what that looks like. Again, we're showing development across the street. We're showing that kind of signage, that kind of civic signage, and here's some tent structures and more complete streets, more ideas of complete streets. It's really about bringing a kind of civic pride. It's about having the architecture, having the design, actually creating to the sense of place that you want this community to have, and to try to be able to build some pride on the part of the people that live here. And that's, and so this is, again, what I'm talking about is us as designers coming in and understanding what the community needs and illustrating it for them, giving them examples of what they would like to see happen, and what would actually kind of build a sense of civic pride in this community. And then what happens if people get this and they say, yeah, that's what we want, then they can go to their elected officials and say, this is what we want. And then things like that is that we want affordable housing in this neighborhood, then that becomes projects. It becomes a project for architects, and so we're in there doing the kind of work, and we would get paid to do that. If they said, okay, we really need housing investment here, then that would be a paid project. But this kind of contribution of services, this kind of donation of services, this kind of architecture as advocacy is what starts the whole ball rolling, and that's why I do it. So I'm going to breathe now. And thank you for sitting through this. If it's a little bit, it's too bad that this isn't live, because I would love to take questions right now.
Well, don't worry. I have some for you.
Oh, good. Go for it.
Because I think our students who are not necessarily engaging, with an actual community in this competition, we have an imagined community.
Right.
They might be interested in knowing, what was the type of space where you were working?
Mhm.
how many people were involved? So how many architects, how many people from the community, how many other people were involved?
Mhm.
Because this kind of event could potentially take place in the facility, the Center for Conversation that we're
Absolutely
designing.
could. Absolutely could. Yeah. Well, we usually put a multidisciplinary team together. And it depends on what the project needs are. Like if I'm the team leader, I'll go out and I'll meet with the people that, the applicants, I'd say, and understand what the issue is. And we'll bring usually a landscape architect, somebody that knows economic development, somebody that can do like, feasibility analysis, maybe a planner, maybe a traffic engineer or some other kind of, green infrastructure engineer. So we'll put a team together, depending on what we anticipate the needs are going to be. We always need to have, a couple people that can draw. I mean, I don't have to do all the drawing myself, but, and usually the proponent group, part of what we expect is that they're going to advertise this, and because we're going to have a couple of different community meetings. And what we look for is big community meetings. We do our first day there. After we're done with the walkthroughs, we'll have a giant community meeting where there'll be anybody that lives in the neighborhood or near the neighborhood is invited to show up. We'll do a very short presentation what we're trying to do, and then we'll break into groups. You saw us sitting around tables talking to people, and we'll be taking notes on and what we want to do is get a sense for what the people that actually live here. We're actually working on behalf of the people that live here. So big meeting space, giant meeting space. We then typically go back to that meeting space to do our work. So it's handy if we have little breakout rooms where we can go pin stuff on the walls, and have conversations, because lots of times the people will want to see what we're working on, especially like the mayor will want to come into the city council. Can we see what you're working on? And we'll go, yeah, no, we need to work right now. Thank you very much. So that kind of variety to the spaces is important. It's if we're in a space where there's also a little kitchen, oh my God, we're so happy because we don't have to. we love to go out to the community for dinner, but we just can't, we're just working a lot. And so if we can have lunch done, if we got lunch prepared for us there, we can have like food stored for us there, then that's a huge bonus for us.
And how long does something like this go on? How long were you in Louisville?
4 days. 4 days.
4 days. Oh, that's a pretty, and it's all day long every day.
Yeah. Day one is data, is our tours, our interviews that have been set up for us. And then day 2, 3 is our research and our starting to think about the answers. Usually by day 3, we're starting to put our ideas together. And day 4 is a public presentation, back to the people that showed up. So it's pretty intense.
That is pretty intense.
It is.
So, that's kind of like a 1-week project that we might do in studio.
Yeah.
So, and I think that this was a great lecture to show, well, number one, the power of observation and conversation and drawing, especially the power of drawing. And I love the way that you call it, the superpowers, that architects have superpowers, because it's really important for our students to understand that no matter whether they go on in architecture or interior design or do something else, they are gaining skills in our courses that set them apart from other community members. It means that you will be able to envision what some of the problems are and envisions what some of the solutions are in ways that other people can't.
Right.
And also, Michael, I think it was really great the way you sort of showed us how cities hang together with streets and public spaces of, squares and parks. And what happens when those cities and systems are broken or interrupted. And we have some of that going on in our imaginary neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so, you start to see in Michael's Solutions, places where they started to knit the fabric back together, that there were certain rules for how buildings address the street. Either, there's kind of a continuous street edge, which may have been broken, or the buildings are not touching each other, but they have a kind of code of how they address the street, that they are set back at a consistent dimension, and even perhaps sometimes have similarities of in architecture, certainly usually in scale.
Exactly.
And we saw really clearly how putting in a park or renovating a park can lead to a kind of vitality for the neighborhood, and give a community a place to really forge personal social relationships. So that's really important. And then, finally, we see how buildings make a difference. A lot of this is looking at very broad scale issues, but when it comes right down to it, most of us listening to this are probably studying architecture or interior design, and so we're really interested in buildings and what that architecture might be like, and how it either addresses the street by being accessible, by allowing a view in and a view out, which makes, I think, when you talk about the complete street, it starts to make a strong, complete street. Or if we don't have that, if we have solid edges where we can't see in and see out and can't get in and get out,
right,
it makes for a pretty dismal street. So I think, we saw all of those lessons in your presentation.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Michael Davis, for participating in this. I'm thanking you on behalf of the CCCAP, and just want to let the students know that there will be 3 other lectures, which at some point you'll be able to find on the competition website, or maybe it's a link to the recorded lecture. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was my great pleasure.